Hello and welcome back to the Somewhere in Crime podcast. I'm Renee, your host, and I'll be your guide on this twisted ride through the newspapers of yesteryear as we search for the most ghastly, intriguing, or scandalous stories to satisfy your morbid lust for all things true crime. Today's headline comes from the Carmi Times, dated December 18, 1984. It reads, "Second son shot to death." I can't imagine how painful it would be to lose one child. The amount of sorrow to lose two children must be infinite. How can so much tragedy befall one family? That was the question on everyone's lips in Eldorado, Illinois, in 1984 when Dr. John Cavaness lost his son Sean. Sean would be the second child Dr. Cavaness would bury since his first son Mark's unexpected death in 1977. Mark Cavaness, 22 years old, had been working alone at his father's catfish farm on that terrible day in April of 1977. It appeared that he decided to retrieve his 12-gauge shotgun from the cab of his truck. In spite of it being in the case, the weapon fired, blasting a hole through the case and Mark's chest. He was found on the ground beside his truck. The gun remained on the seat. It seemed to be a terrible accident. Investigators felt from the beginning that something was wrong. Mark had obviously died from a gunshot wound. The autopsy would confirm that. But exactly how the weapon was discharged while remaining in the case, be it accidental or intentional, was a mystery. Detectives tried to replicate what happened that day, but were stymied as to how the gun fired. The coroner ruled that the manner of death was undetermined. Mark's case remained open. Detectives never forgot the odd circumstances of Mark's death. Sean was Mark's younger brother. Together they shared brothers Kevin and Patrick. Like Mark, Sean was only 22 years old at the time of his death. It was 1984, and Sean lived in an apartment in St. Louis, which is about a 2-hour drive away from the town the boys were raised. The boys had grown up in a household that accommodated them with the money and stature of being the son of a prominent town doctor would give. Of course, this particular town only had about 5,200 people, so I guess you could say the boys' dad was a big fish in a very small pond. A very big fish. He sat beside the dying until they breathed their last breath. He brought babies into the world. He performed surgeries that saved lives. His bedside manner was stellar. For this, he had earned the admiration of the entire community. They felt he could do no wrong. With Sean's death, there would be no ambivalence. Sean was murdered. His body was found on the side of the road with 2 bullets in his head and no gun in sight. A passing motorist found him and called for help. He had no identification on him. His remains were in the morgue for 12 hours before he was finally identified through fingerprints. His grieving father was questioned, but would be of no help. He reported he hadn't seen his son in weeks. Sean's mother and brothers weren't able to provide any answers either. Detectives would have to keep digging. They got to work interviewing other witnesses. They visited the apartment building Sean called home. That's when they got the break they needed, and it was all thanks to a crazy coincidence. A woman in the building reported seeing a strange vehicle following behind her when she came home from work the night Sean was last seen alive. She had been so unsettled by the event that she had her husband jot down the license plate number when she got home. And with that one piece of evidence, the case was practically solved. The detectives ran the plate, and who do you think it came back to? Sean's dad, Dr. John Cavaness, who claimed he hadn't seen his son in weeks. The detectives were obviously suspicious. Why would he lie about such a thing? Further interviews with neighbors provided more eyewitness sightings of Dr. John visiting his son the night he was murdered, including one neighbor who saw them leave together at about 1 a.m. That's just a few hours before the coroner would estimate the time of death. Dr. Cavaness was arrested for suspicion of murder 6 days after Sean's death, right as he was leaving his son's memorial service. In the police station, Dr. Cavaness stuck to his story that he hadn't seen his son in weeks. At least at first he did. As the hours wore on, the story began to evolve into something incriminating. But what? police were keeping his story under their hats. But one thing was for sure. To many, Dr. Cavaness looked guilty as sin, but to others, he remained a saint. Even as the good doctor led the police to the gun, a .357 Magnum used to put those bullets into Sean's head that night, hidden in Dr. Cavanness's garage, even as he told them where he hid Sean's wallet, going so far as to draw a map to its location. The residents of Eldorado continued to stand behind them. They even started a fund to pay for his defense. They wholeheartedly believed Dr. Cavaness was innocent. Maybe the police had made a mistake, or he was being framed, or if Dr. Cavaness did kill Sean, maybe Sean had it coming. Anything other than the caring and brilliant Dr. Cavaness was a cold-hearted murderer. One citizen was quoted as saying, "If he did do it, I hope and pray they can't prove it." People were even mortgaging their houses to contribute to the defense fund. Everyone would have to wait for the trial for an explanation. With the money the town raised for him, Dr. Cavaness could afford the best defense. And he needed a good defense because the prosecution was going for the death penalty. The trial began in Clayton, Missouri on July 9, 1985. The medical examiner was the first called. He testified that the first shot was fired into the back of Sean's neck while he was standing, and the gun was about an inch away. The second shot was fired while he was on the ground and entered his ear while the gun was about 18 to 24 inches away. He also testified that Sean's blood alcohol content was 0.26. This is more than twice the legal limit, and so high it would be difficult for him to perform any functions, let alone intentionally shoot himself. While this appeared to be damning information, the ME did agree with the defense that it is common for those who commit suicide to shoot themselves in the head. But the defense had no explanation as to how the shots were fired from such a distance and while Sean was so intoxicated. The prosecution called Sean's mom, who testified about how Dr. Cavaness had been a cold and indifferent husband and father, but kind to his patients. She referred to him as Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. She also told a story of how he'd even once threatened to kill Sean in the past. Kevin, Mark and Sean's younger brother, told the court that his dad refused to pay for Sean's funeral. He finally paid, but the check was returned for insufficient funds. Kevin said his dad claimed he had no money. When he inquired about the insurance benefits, his dad claimed there was no insurance. And that's not all. He also spoke about how Dr. Cavaness acted almost jovially at the memorial service, chatting and greeting guests. It was almost as if he thought he was at a wedding reception. But it gets worse. Kevin said he heard his dad, whom he repeatedly referred to as Sean's dad, tell Patrick, the youngest brother, "Let's not make Sean into something he wasn't. He was an embarrassment to me." Words that I'm sure stung the jury to hear. Sean's friends testified to his emotional state. All of Sean's friends and family agreed Sean was happy right before he died. Sure, in the past he'd struggled with alcohol and depression, even telling some that he had thought of suicide. But that was in the past. He had turned things around. He was satisfied with his life and thrilled that for the first time in a long time, the relationship with his dad seemed good. Detectives testified that they confirmed via ballistics the gun in Dr. Cavanness's garage was the murder weapon. The insurance companies reported that, yes, there was insurance. In fact, there was multiple policies on all three of his living sons, taken out in early 1984, all payable to John Cavaness, each totaling about $148,000. This, combined with the testimony from accountants that the doctor was deeply in debt, provided an excellent motive. So far, it wasn't looking good for Dr. Cavaness. He would have to come up with a good story to explain all of the evidence away, and as many fans who filled the courtroom to support him would not be disappointed. His story? He and Sean had been at Sean's apartment drinking together. A lot. He freely acknowledged that. He told a story of how they decided they would go for a drive at around 1 a.m. Eventually, the ride would lead them out onto the countryside, to Times Beach, where Sean's body would be found the next day. According to Dr. Cavaness, Sean, a recovering alcoholic, became despondent in his drunkenness. Dr. Cavaness brought a gun with him that night. He said his plan was to sell it to a gun shop the next day. For some reason, when Sean asked to see the gun, he gave it to him. Not only did he give it to him, but he stepped out of the car, ostensibly to retrieve something from the trunk of the vehicle. That's when he heard Sean say, "Tell Mom I love her and I'm sorry." Then he heard a gunshot. He ran to Sean's side, but it was too late. Sean was dead. But if you'll recall, Sean was shot twice in the head. This is where the story goes from crazy to absurd. Dr. Cavaness claimed, in an effort to shield his family from the pain and embarrassment of a suicide, he made the decision to take the gun and shoot Sean's dead body a second time to make his death appear to be a murder. He then took the gun and wallet and left his son there, face down in the dirt, to work on his story. When asked how, if Sean did indeed shoot himself, there was no gunpowder residue in his hands, Dr. Cavaness was ready with an explanation. He had thought of that and wiped his hands with a wet cloth he retrieved from the car. You see, he thought of everything. Opposing accountants would argue that Dr. Cavaness wasn't broke. He had plenty of money. It was all just tied up in investments. If he needed money, he could just liquidate some property and have been out of debt. There was no need to kill someone, let alone his own son. So which would it be? Was the doctor a loving father who was beloved by his community for his compassion and care, or was he a debt-ridden murderer who killed his own son for insurance money? Well, those following the story in their local paper would have to wait, because 6 days into it, the judge declared a mistrial. This may have been the best thing that could have happened for Dr. Cavaness. When polled, all the jurors said they planned to convict based on what they had already heard. But it wasn't to be. It seems that the jury had been shown evidence that Dr. Cavaness had taken a polygraph test, something even in the 80s wasn't admissible in court and considered highly prejudicial. Everyone would have to wait to find out how the story would end. The second time around, support for the doctor would not be as strong, although he still had a few supporters there in court with him every day. This time, in addition to all the information already given, the new jurors would hear about the Christmas party Dr. Cavaness attended the night after his son died. According to witnesses, he seemed happy and very sociable. The ME, under new questioning, would testify that the shot to the head was the first shot fired into Sean. When looking back at the doctor's previous statements, he said he was the one who fired the shot into the head. So if this was correct, by his own admission, this must mean Dr. Cavaness fired the first shot. It wasn't looking any better the second time around. But there would be wins for the defense, too. The agent that sold the doctor the life insurance policy admitted he approached Dr. Cavaness about buying the policies. As a matter of fact, he claimed he had to speak with him multiple times before he finally agreed to buy them. That doesn't sound like a man plotting to kill for profit. This time, the case would go to the jury, and the jury would find. After 3 hours of deliberation, the jury found that Dr. John Cavaness was guilty of murdering his own son for the insurance money. They recommended the death penalty, and the judge agreed. He was sentenced to die in the gas chamber. With one win under their belts, prosecutors announced that they would be pursuing charges for the death of Mark Cavaness. Poor Mark, who, if it weren't for the death of his brother, may not have had the chance to receive justice, was going to get his day in court too. Well, that's what should have happened. On November 16, 1986, 1 year after the trial, Dr. Cavaness was found dead in his cell with an electrical cord tied around his neck. 1 day after the suicide clause expired on his life insurance policy, he left his entire estate to his girlfriend. So what do you think? Do you think he killed Sean, or did he kill himself? Do you think Mark's death was an accident? Let me know what you think in the comments. I'm Renee, and this has been the Somewhere in Crime podcast. Thank you for listening.